CapeTalk, Pippa's Planet.
Now, my guest joining me in studio for the remainder of Pippa's Planet is someone who is really killing two birds with one stone, or tackling two giant issues with one very simple solution. The issues I'm talking about are the high rates of hunger in this country and our current water crisis as well. If you were listening to the show yesterday, you would have heard us talking about the Child Gauge report that told us that 5 million plus South African children go hungry on a regular basis. We know food security is a massive problem. In fact, there is a huge food security conference happening in Cape Town this very weekend, and one part of the solution could be the opportunity to grow at least some of your own food at home. But the question is, how do you do that if your home is a tiny shack, if you don't own property, if you have limited space, little water, and no time to spend on a garden? Well, that's where my guest comes in, and his solution is called the HiGro, a tower garden system developed by James Dick and his partner Nola. James, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Pippa.
Where did the inspiration for this come from?
I think we all have a social responsibility, and mine was to reduce our carbon footprint. I think my concern about climate forced me to change the way that I think about food production. And then also there is the food security issue. High density living environments all over the world. People need to be able to produce their own food, and sustainably too.
Okay, so your system came up with an answer that allows people to do that in even the tiniest of spaces. When I say it is a tower garden, I'm looking at photographs that show me very clearly what that means. But for the sake of those who are just listening to this, won't you explain what the HiGro is?
I think it's best described as a segmented column. The column is suspended from an appropriate fixture, like I would say a beam above your head or something or other. The column can grow up to 48 plants, so that is substantial. And what happens is that you plant seedlings into these coir modules, and you plant 6 per module. There are 8 modules in a column, so you get 48 plants.
Okay, now you've shared some photos with us, which my producer is going to tweet, of just how effective they are. I mean, I've never seen a batch of kale growing like this on ground level, let alone on a tiny little column under a very simple structure. I mean, obviously it allows you to put the plants under shade, under shelter, etc. But tell us, besides a beautiful, abundant crops of kale and lettuce, what other kinds of things are people growing in these?
Well, there's always the aesthetic side, and you can produce flowers, and you can create a lovely display. But I think it all comes down to food, and my concern is to feed, particularly kids. The aged can become useful, and I say that with respect. But the point is that the vertical column is accessible to somebody in a wheelchair. We rarely think about those issues, but somebody who's homebound, can grow plants. They can become sustainable, and or otherwise they can supply nutrient-rich food for their kids and the family, so they can become useful. From that perspective.
Yeah, talk to us about what's inside that column. You said it's a coir system. What's the actual growing medium?
Okay, so what we have inside is an interlocking central core, which forms the backbone of the column. And then we've got coir growing medium. Coir is produced from coconut palm. So it is a renewable and a replaceable growing medium. And then it has an outer plastic sleeve, which has perforations in it where you plant the plants into. Now, what happens is that you will irrigate the column with a compression sprayer. So it doesn't require any electricity, which I think, in the urban environment, particularly in poorer communities, that is a tremendous advantage. You'd have to irrigate once a day in summer and about once every 3 days in winter. So what you do is you can use grey water, by the way. So you will fill your compression sprayer with 5 liters of water, add some fertilizer, which will be provided, and then you pump it up to pressure. Now the pressure will drive the water into the column. Each segment is individually irrigated and individually drained, which is the novelty of the unit, because otherwise you'd get a moisture differentiation through the column, and the plants will look bigger on the bottom and smaller at the top, because by the time the top plants need a second irrigation, the bottom plants are still saturated. So that is what makes it unique from that perspective. But effectively then what happens is that water will be driven through the column. It will irrigate the column. Any effluent will run out the bottom, and that can be recycled. So it doesn't effectively use any excess moisture besides transpiration, which is why it's so water friendly.
Yeah. So a maximum of 5 liters of grey water irrigation consumption per day is the figure I read in researching. And but yeah, so just to emphasize, grey water is fine for those who are sitting going, but you can't water anything once a day. Well, you can if you're using grey water. I know you've been working with the Provincial Department of Agriculture to try and get this piloted, as it were, and you've particularly been working in an informal settlement in the Botrefeer area. Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, that's correct. We started with the Department of Agriculture, but I think what happened is that we found that we need assistance and we need relationships. And I think what we've gone and done is we've downscaled a little bit because we needed more cover. And now what I'm doing is I'm working with the Overberg Wheelchair Association, empowering disabled people to sustainably grow food in the HiGro system. And what we're doing is that we are providing training and support. And I think this will secure the longevity of the initiative. I think these guys that we have allocated or selected, these recipients, are very capable at becoming technical advisors in themselves. And that's how the concept will snowball. But it's got to be managed by people that are interested. And we found that this is going to be the answer. We're also partnering with a social enterprise called Made with Rural, and the whole concept is available on www.lighthousemporium.co.za/high-growers-feet, as in feature.
Okay, so lighthousemporium.co.za, and you're looking for high growers feature. I've already had an email from someone asking, is this commercially available? Can I buy one to put into my own household?
Yes, it's certainly available. Not commercially though. I'm sticking to the urban or urban agriculture market.
Okay.
And I think it's certainly available, and it's available from Lighthouse Emporium.
Okay, so that's the answer. What is the cost of setting up a system like this, James?
We're looking at 1,250 Rand, I believe. And that is for the column itself. And then there's an extra cost for the compression sprayer, but most people have them at home. So I'm not combining it as a package. So
Okay.
you can either go and buy one from your local agri-market and etc. But I certainly do supply them as well.
Okay. Now, I have to ask, because every time I do a gardening segment, we get at least one or two calls about pest issues. Is that something you have to be concerned about in this gardening module as in any other kind?
I think I've been growing with these towers for a long time. The only pest that has ever given me any headaches is leaf miner, but I eat those leaves. I pick them off and
Okay.
eat them anyway. But because the column is elevated, it's not touching the ground, so we don't have any snail problems. You know, and I think that's fantastic, because I think that's one of the major issues, you know, when it comes to this type of food production and pests. But you're picking, you're eating from the column all the time, and the nice thing about that is that there's traceability. You know exactly what's happened to those leaves. You know what's been what treatment's been given to those leaves, and I think that's nice as well.
James, how quick is the process from the time you install the HiGro system and you get those seedlings in? Obviously, it's going to depend on the kind of plants you plant, I assume. But just give us a ballpark idea of how quickly a family can get food coming out the other end that they can harvest and eat.
Well, I've developed a fantastic concept in which we ship live seedlings. So you have a little box. You tick boxes on a website and or on an app, and you select the herbs or green leafy vegetables that you require, and you pay an amount, and the next day it's delivered at your door. So the fact is, and this is what the great thing is that I can't produce seedlings. I'm just not good at it. But we have commercial nurseries that are producing those seedlings and shipping them to your door. So by the time you get the column, you can install or insert plants that are quite well developed. Okay, so you're looking at about 2 to 3 weeks before you start harvesting, depending on the season, obviously. Winter plants grow slower. Summer plants grow fantastically well. So I would say after 2 weeks you can start picking. And the lovely thing is you don't terminate the plant. You just take enough for a salad. So in other words, basically you don't waste fridge space, which is an environmental issue as well. And I think that, the plants stay alive. So you pick enough for that day, you make a selection and pick it directly into your salad bowl and eat away.
It's such a simple, elegant solution. It looks wonderful too. I mean, some of the photos here, you've got families who've combined the vegetable growing with beautiful flowers in between. So you've got these verdant, green, abundant leaf columns next to nasturtiums and things growing out in great bursts of color. They look beautiful, as well as providing food. So it's an absolute win-win. Lighthousemporium.co.za is the website to visit if you'd like to buy one. HiGro Tower Garden. And James, it's been wonderful to meet you. Thanks so much for coming in. I'd like to just share your email address, if I may, if anybody would like to know more about the system or make contact with you.